Right now we're seeing a little bit of a revelation in the gaming scene, something that people have been in denial about for quite some time, something that I think needs to be addressed, and something that I think is very, very important when it comes to future video game discussion and Gamergate as a whole. These certain video games are botted. That means they are pushed to the forefront on social media. They are talked about among game journalists. They get unfairly high scores, and they simply aren't as popular as the community makes them out to be, right? I've used the term Astroturfed in the past, but recently Grummz and I think some other guy in the scene has uh, released a revelation about how common it is to bot these games, to raise those player counts, to make sure they keep getting posted about, keep getting talked about. And this explains quite a lot about the recent state of video game journalism, because you're always seeing people try to say that, like, oh, Diablo 4 is good now, or Baldur's Gate 3 is one of the best games of the year, or Pow World is great, or Helldivers 2 is great. You're seeing all these people singing to the heavens about how great these games are, but when you look at the reality of what's going on with this, like when you look at Power World, right, 95% drop off in like 2 weeks, right? That's insane. Like it didn't hold any like retention value at all, right? Like you would think some people would come back to it like a couple of weeks later. No, like it has fallen like a rock. The reason being that Pocket Pair has run out of shill money. They have run out of bot money, right? They can't pay to maintain the audience that they created the illusion for, like that the to maintain the illusion that they had like this great big massive audience, right? Baldur's Gate 3 won a rigged game award, and what happened? It completely fell off a cliff. Nobody talks about it. Nobody remembers it. People are like desperately trying to brush the game's problems under a rug, but the reality is Baldur's Gate 3 is a failure. Larian has been fired and will never work with Hasbro ever again. There will never be a Baldur's Gate 4. And now, recently, I think this is the subject that Grummz fixated on. Alan Wake 2's numbers are fake, right? The Epic has, botted this game to make it look like it's significantly more popular than it really is. And Alan Wake 2, I think, more than any other game I've mentioned, is really interesting, like a really blatant example of this, because this is a game that nobody was talking about before the Game Awards 2023. But what did they do? They like basically made it the runner up for the game of the year. Like they shafted the way more popular games, Hogwarts Legacy, Starfield, and The Legend of Zelda Tears of the Kingdom, and Mario Wonder, excuse me. They shafted all these popular games in favor of trying to shill you on Alan Wake 2, which I think is safe to say is the most Sweet Baby influenced product on the market right now. Right? Before Sweet Baby was exposed, like this is what they were pushing. This is the kind of thing they were doing. Like they produced an Alan Wake game where you don't play as Alan Wake. So to me, like that really just demonstrates like where we're at now. This is no longer about console wars, right? Like that scene in Metal Gear Solid 4 where Snake like war has changed. It's like that. Like gaming has changed. Like it's no longer about like selling you on games or selling you on like consoles or brands or developers. Now they're trying to push an agenda, and like almost to ludicrous like lengths, because there have been weird instances that I've pointed out on this channel that just don't really make any sense to me. Like for example, Capcom USA, their insistence that they promote the Spear Hunter, what is his name, Susie Hunter, above like every other celeb in their sphere, right? The man Susie Hunter is like always like the one given preferential treatment. Like he's always like on stage with them promoting all these different projects. He's reviewing games that he's in. Dragon's Dogma 2, he has like an exclusive pawn modeled after him, right? Like you have people like that, right? And like you have to wonder like why these specific people are given like preferential treatment, and it is to push an agenda. It is to push an ideology onto people. And that is what we're seeing from all these companies. Like Disney has come out and admitted it at this point. Like, we're not interested in making a profit. We're not interested in making good products. We are interested in pushing the woke agenda onto the population. And now we are starting to see this, like, in a variety of video game developers. Essentially everyone, like, outside of Nintendo. Not that, like, the meme among a lot of people is that, like, oh, even Nintendo is doing it, but I've seen no signs of that. Everybody else other than Nintendo is, like, going all in on this nonsense, right? And it's getting more and more laughable. It's getting more and more ridiculous seeing what they put out and seeing what people defend, honestly. Like Helldivers 2, I think it's very frustrating seeing people, like, try to say that, like, oh, I've never seen a game support new weapons and items this long for free. Like, yeah, try playing Splatoon, genius, right? They've managed that for like 2 years. So when you when you look at, like, what's happening with video game journalism. Like, when you look at what's happening with the industry, like, it couldn't be more obvious that the games that people are playing and talk about, the Hogwarts legacies, like, they are being shafted for political reasons. And this is an observable phenomenon. Like, people tried upon release saying that, like, Baldur's Gate 3 was what, like, sold like 34 million units or some shit. But, Hogwarts Legacy sold like what, 25 million? And, like, they claimed they were the highest selling game that year. And Baldur's Gate 3 didn't dispute it, like, because they didn't sell that many units. They didn't sell half that many units, probably. Like, the reality is Baldur's Gate 3 was not as popular or successful as they made it out to be. And this is why. Because the numbers that the gaming industry released to the public are fake. Another good example is Jim Ryan's recent claim that the PlayStation 2 has sold 160 million units, right? Which is quite a bit higher than what it was in 2012, right? When the DS sees production, like, the the PS2 was at like 152 or something like that. But, like, we've slowly seen it, like, trickle upwards over the past several years to like 154 and then 157 and now where it is at 160. The reason they're doing this is because they're desperate to maintain the illusion that the PS2 is the most popular console ever made. It's not. And they'll go to any lengths to try to protect that reputation. And now that the Switch is basically all but guaranteed to overtake it, like, they are just going to keep doubling down on this mindset that on this idea that, like, the PS2 is still selling like, they'll do anything they can to, like, create the illusion of popularity, the illusion of success, but that isn't the same as real genuine success. Now, is it? Like, I said this before, but it really does feel like if the sales numbers are fake, if this is true, then it means that, like, the commonly held misconceptions among fans that the N64, the GameCube, and the Wii U were failures is simply not true. Because these consoles are still played to this day. They're still appreciated. They have dozens of classic games, right? They are beloved video game platforms, far more than the PS1 or the PS2, right? And yet, like, game journalists get really angry if you dare bring up the N64 was successful, right? Like, what happened when Nintendo confirmed it would come to NSO? Like, oh, they're going to have 6 games? Yeah. Like, the narrative that the N64 didn't have a lot of games does not hold true to reality, now, does it? Like, when you actually look at all the games that are on there already and all the stuff that, like, still needs to come out, Castlevania 64, Goemon, Bomberman, like, the list goes on and on. Super Smash Bros. 64, like Harvest Moon 64 in and of itself, like, is a genuine classic that not a lot of people played. And I'm sure a lot of people are coping about that, like, oh, Back to Nature is better. But the reality is that 64 is a classic game in its own right. The 64 was a classic console in its own right. Like, again, like, what we're experiencing now with the Wii U revisionism and the Switch revisionism is that people don't like admitting that these Nintendo consoles are more successful than the adult, extreme emphasis on the quotations there, on the adult video game platforms. Like the reality is, once that narrative crumbles, the narrative that like the PlayStation and Xbox have like mature games for more adult gamers that are more in depth and more technically demanding, which is not never has been true. Like once the narrative for that ends, like they are never going to recover from it. And I think we have been seeing like the beginning of the end of that for the past 10 years. The Wii U, I think, more than any other Nintendo console, has made people realize that Nintendo exclusives are absolutely superior to the competition. And that image is not going to go away anytime soon.